think I've made friends with a lot of people.
Yeah.
That means a lot to me. And I would say I'm very rich in friends.
You sure are.
I just love people and how to, when you meet somebody, make time for them and have a natter. Because this is not a rehearsal. You only pass this way once.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
Hello and welcome to episode 112 of Island Influencers. I'm honoured to introduce this week's Island Influencer, Derry Kissack BEM. Derry is known to thousands, especially as a key member, frontman of the world-famous Purple Helmets motorcycle display team. Many of you will recognise him as the energetic commentator who guides awestruck spectators through their breathtaking performances. He's a favourite at the TT and shows worldwide. You'll immediately notice from his accent that Derry was born and raised here in the Isle of Man. In our conversation, Derry opens up about his life experiences, starting with his childhood memories, education and profound passion for motorcycles. We also delve into the development of the Isle of Man TT's pit lane and discuss the crucial role of supporting local businesses and individuals who contribute to the island's vibrant tourism industry. Derry's journey hasn't been without hardship. He lost both his parents by the age of 24, and he reveals how a motorbike accident led him to write his first book. Despite his challenges, Derry's wonderful sense of humour, spirit and resilience shines through, especially in the fascinating story of how the Purple Helmets were formed. He proudly takes credit for getting them into the show business. He even shares some exclusive tales for you, our Island Influencers listeners. This episode is packed with great yarns and unforgettable moments I hadn't heard before. A laugh a minute. So sit back and enjoy as we dive into the incredible life and adventures of Derry Kissack BEM. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'd love to welcome you to this week's edition of Island Influencers with Derry Kissack, who I'm delighted, Mr. Derry Kissack BEM, nonetheless, who's my guest this week. And it's so lovely, and I'm so honoured that you've agreed to do my podcast, Derry. So welcome.
Indeed, Sharon, and it's indeed an honour for me to be interviewed because I do talk a lot of shite, as you know, and
you don't.
I'm well known for it. And yes, it is an honour, and thank you for this today.
Well, we've just been, before we started talking today, we've been looking at your recent visit to Government House where you received your medal and the lovely photographs and the reunion of you with the boys, the Purple Helmets. Tell me, what was that like?
Well, it was very emotional, Sharon, as I've just pointed out. I'm on some of the photographs. I almost look as if I'm crying, but I was actually grimacing because of all the nice things people were saying about me. And I thought, well, is that me they're talking about? But apparently it was. Yeah, it was a great night at Government House, and they really pushed the boat out, and there was a big roaring fire when we got there, and a lovely ambience and nice atmosphere.
Right.
And warmth and love, really.
You can tell it comes through in the pictures. It looks amazing. Anyway, congratulations.
Oh, thank you for that.
So most listeners to the podcast will know you best as the PR, the front man for the world famous Purple Helmets cycling extravaganza stunt team. So how, just for the benefit of our listeners, and me, actually, I don't know your backstory. So you sound like you're from here. So
was it a giveaway?
Slightly.
There's a little bit of an accent there, I suppose. And I remember being at school, and there's a snobby teacher there, and she said to me one day, "You're awfully Manx, Kissack." I said, "Yes, I know." I said, "Well, where are you from?" And I got the stick for that. She said I shouldn't be back answering, but...
I don't know. Curiosity, yeah.
Curiosity got the stick. Never mind, killed the cat. And I've always been very proud to be Manx. And I do feel that the accent is being lost. And as I said to one of the radio presenters recently, there really is no R in Castletown.
No, there isn't.
There isn't.
No.
And it's a great shame. I'm quite critical of Manx radio, Sharon, and I don't want to be a downer at all, but it's all very posh now, and I'm not really an advocate of the Manx Gaelic even. I just like the culture of the Manx people, and I do feel like it's being lost. It's well, it's almost as if the kids are afraid to pronounce the words properly, and it's got there's no T anymore. What if, but what, all that nonsense. And it doesn't cost much to speak properly and pronounce the words properly as we were taught when we were young.
Yeah. Where was that teacher from? Do you remember?
Oh, well, I won't tell you. I won't tell you that because I'd have to shoot you.
Oh, fair enough. No, let's not do that. So where'd you go to school?
Well, I started school very young, actually, at the collegiate school in Douglas, and it was a little private school up at Mount Bradder. And my brother and I, Howard, he's a year and a half older than myself, we started school, and he was looking after me. I was 4 years old, and it was quite an eye-opener, really, because they were long days, and when you're 4 years old and you have a couple of sandwiches and a glass of Ribena for your lunch, it was a bit of an eye-opener. But and I never liked it, but it did me well in a lot of ways because they were very hot on English grammar, and we were taught to write rather than print from that age, and I've always found English grammar quite a doddle, really, because I passed my GCE, no bother at all with it, really, and I think it goes right back to the collegiate school. Yeah. And it was proper teaching, whereas the primary schools, I think at the time, were being taught to print the names and that sort of thing, but we did longhand, and I've always written longhand. Yeah. And it has helped me. And I've written a 3 books.
Yes, I know. I'm so impressed. You're a published author three times, no less. And we'll put the links to the books in the show notes because they're obviously bestsellers on Amazon. Yeah. And so what happened when you did you go to Douglas High School?
Well, no, in between there, the collegiate school was winding down. It was run by 2 sisters.
What a shame.
The Misses Reid, and their brother was Bertie Reid, the very famous Bertie Reid. He was a maths teacher at the school. He was also a reverend gentleman, a vicar, and a big man in the Manx Motorcycle Club. And his daughter, I think it was his daughter, was Pat Reid, who married Jeff Duke. Well, I can imagine at the collegiate school at Mount Bradder, there was a big display cabinet full of silver trophies, and they were Jeff Duke's trophies.
Fancy that?
Yeah, in the early 50s. Well, we must have been agog looking at these trophies, and that's how I sort of first came into contact with motorbikes, with Jeff Duke and whatever. And in fact, Peter Duke and Michael started the collegiate school probably just when I was leaving there.
Right.
But I was 8 when I left the collegiate. I went to Braddon School with a wonderful teacher called Tommy Quayle. And it was a very, very happy school at Braddon. It was great because we had open air, we had playtimes, we had all sorts of things that we didn't have at the collegiate school, which was very Victorian.
And that's the same Braddon School now they're still there.
Yeah, it's about 2 or 3 times the size now.
Yes.
It was the original little Braddon School. And
I know it well. That's where our band practices on a Tuesday night.
Really?
Go make a racket, yeah.
Really? Well, at the time, Tommy Quayle was the headmaster, and there was a Miss Lace, Frances Lace, who actually had a beard. and the kids they weren't as cheeky as they are now, and they probably would have got the stick every day now. But
well, no, you're not allowed to use the stick either, so she'd have been safe.
But and Nina Bonai was the other teacher. There's only 3 teachers, And Miss Bow and I had the infants, and when I started there at 8, I was in Frances Lace's class, and she was a very good teacher, very strict. Used to put the rulers across the back of your knuckles if you were naughty. But she was very kind.
So I guess you never fell foul of that.
Oh, every day. But she was a very kind lady. And I remember she used
from the corporal punishment.
Yeah, she was very kind. And at the end of term each time, out of her own pocket, she used to buy a packet of Murray mints. I can still remember these Murray mints for every one of the pupils in the class. And in those days, Isle of Man dairies brought little bottles of milk, and I became the milk monitor. And that meant that I had to squish the caps on the milk with either 2 thumbs or a little plastic device. And the little milk bottles were free milk for all the kids.
Yeah, I remember. There was still a thing when I was at school. Not many years later.
But I think it was quite a few years. You'd only be a very twinkle in your father's eye at this time,
yeah,
I think.
You never know. So, where did you find the introduction into trials riding? Because you were a big trials rider.
I was. I loved the motorbikes. And
was that through your connections at the collegiate school, do you think?
No, nothing to do with that. Our neighbours at the time at Ballawilly Hillier, the Clegg family were stewards for the Kirkpatricks at Ballawilly Hillier. And Stuart Clegg, who I'm still very friendly with,
was a Crosby.
Great influence on me. He bought a new Greaves bike and he brought it over. My dad used to do bits of welding for people, and he brought it over the yard, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a super thing. And I would like to try this later on in life. And he was there, and there was also no relation to us, but a man called Ray Kissack, who married Jennifer Kelly, and their daughter Anne, who was a famous runner. Annalie and
Christine.
And Christine Kissack, that was their dad, and he had a Greaves bike as well, and that was a big influence on me. And another one was Tommy Quine, who was the shepherd up on the mountains, and he used to come around the yard on an AJS. Well, by this time I'd been quite hooked with the bikes, and knowing that my uncle Henry had been a grass track champion in the 1930s, and he actually introduced the studded tyre.
What, into grass track racing?
Yeah, they
the athletics team company, the athletics squad wouldn't have liked that, would they?
No, they wouldn't. But I remember he'd put nuts and bolts through the tyre, drilled the front tyre to get some grip. And there was nothing in the rules against it, but nobody could afford knobbly tyres. They were in their infancy, and Henry decided he would make a studded tyre. Well, he put studs all round it. I think it was the right-hand side of the front tyre. And
because you only need it in the one corner, don't you?
Well, as long as the course was clockwise, that was fine. And he went to Grieber Sports at the time, and I think the Corlett brothers were there, Bertie and Charlie and all the people that rode in the sports, and they decided it wasn't fair, so they decided to reverse the direction and go the other way. Well, apparently Henry still won. He was very good on a motorbike, and maybe that's where I got some of my sort of, I wouldn't say talent, but some of my enthusiasm from. And but I've always been into motorbikes, really.
So did that start when you were at school, or had you left by that point? So you went to Braddon School, and then you went to high school.
The high school. Yeah, what a rude awakening that was, because coming from Braddon School, where it was wholesome and healthy, and we'd never heard swear words like we heard at Ballacameen. It was like the human jungle to go from a lovely little country school to this awful place, and I'd never liked it.
No.
But
it's much better now.
I hope so, because at the time, Tommy Quayle would send somebody around to his house to get his gardening boots, and we'd all have a game of football, and it didn't matter how many was in the team. We had a damn good kick about, and everybody had exercise, and they enjoyed it. And when you went to the high school, they were trying to make everybody Stanley Matthews or Bobby Charlton at the time, and it wasn't going to happen. And they picked the best 11 and they played, and the rest of us were on the line with a flag.
Yeah, it's a lot more inclusive now, I think you'll find. But
it needs to be.
Needed to be, yeah.
They spoiled it for a lot of us because...
that's a shame.
All we wanted was a kickabout. So what I used to find out I would do was I'd buzz off home and go down to Quarterbridge and hop on the train, because it used to click-clack through there about 3:30, and they didn't used to miss me. I used to just go home down Belmont Hill, and there was another boy from Peel. I still see him sometimes, Ian Corrie, and we'd just bunk off and just go home, and that was the best education really, because back home in Crosby I had an Austin 7 and a motorbike, had a BSA Bantam, and there was no education like that at the high school. It was just it was an awful place to be really. They didn't really teach me much, I don't think.
No.
I'd learned so much from Tommy Quayle, and I was in the top class at Ballacameen. I was right in 1S, which was, well, the equivalent of 1A now, I suppose. It was SALUTE. 1S was the top class, and a lot of the kids from Braddon were in the top streams.
Yes, more individualised attention, I suppose, in smaller classes.
We've been taught by a real teacher, not some bully who hit you around the head. And there was one teacher there in particular, he just used to... I don't think he should have been teaching kids. And I mentioned him in my autobiography, actually. I used to see him coming towards me, and I knew I was going to get a thick ear, and it was for no reason, really. He was just a nasty man, and there was odd ones. They really shouldn't have been in charge of kids. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's a valid opinion. You know, the receiving end of it. It's obviously, you know.
Yeah. Well, some of the other ones would have their mortarboard and a cape on them, swooshing along like Batman, and that didn't really impress me much either. I thought, one of these days, you know.
So, what age were you when you left school?
Well, I was 16. I took me O-levels, and I got a few of those, and I starred in woodwork, which I hope to do because our family are joiners and builders and blacksmiths, undertakers, a proper country business, and I think it's probably one of the oldest businesses in the Isle of Man. Back to 1715, we could trace our roots in Crosby.
Kissack Brothers.
Kissack Brothers of Crosby, and they built a lot of Crosby, and the halfway house to Peel, they built that, and all the houses up towards the pub, maybe the pub, I don't know, but they did a lot of work also on Greba Castle when that was being built. And in fact, there's a little story with that, because I came into a job one time where I think it was... I can't remember who said now that maybe Kissacks would be able to make these newel posts, because at Greba Castle there's a big outside balustrade, beautifully made in timber with a big handrail and balusters and a newel post, and they were rotten. And somebody said, "Oh, who could make these?" They didn't have a lathe big enough, because
big things,
the newel post was 16 inches square, and my dad was alive at the time, and he said, I believe we've still got the lathe that made the originals.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, and
that must have been a big bit of kit.
Well, it was all broken down into pieces by then. Yeah. So he reassembled it, and I think it was worked off the water wheel originally, because our place had friction wheels and water power for the circular saw and corn mill grinding and that sort of thing. Wow. But he engineered an electric motor onto it, and we had this big lump of pitch pine, a great lump of pitch pine. It was nearly 18 inches square, actually, big beam, and you can imagine the vibration of this when it started to turn. Yeah. And I was a bit afraid to put the chisel near it, but eventually knocked the corners off it and made this replica newel post.
So you made it?
I made it, and it was we got it tannalised down at Quiggins, and it was put in, and then I made all the balusters, which were much easier. They were much smaller. I think they were 6 inches square. I knocked them all off with the chisel, and then we took the lathe to bits again, and it was never used after. I think it still lies there at Crosby.
Does it really? Well, there you go.
Yeah,
That's
was wonderful history there, Sharon.
Yeah, for sure.
That was one of the little jobs I enjoyed doing, you know. But I've done, I think I said to you before, I think I've had about 3 lifetimes, really, because I've served my time with a great company, Skillicorns in Onken, as a joiner. Well, just to digress a little bit, just to go back an inch or two, when I left school, I went to the College of Further Education for a year because I really didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. I kind of wanted to be in the building trade, but my father didn't really want me to because he'd had a hard struggle through the 50s without much work.
I can imagine.
But I loved what he did. I idolised him. He was a great joiner, wonderful hands, stonework. He was a very versatile craftsman. And anyway, I went to the College of Further Education, and they persuaded me to go to Doughty's factory. It was the new factory over the road here from the little mill on School Road. It was called Isle of Man Engineering.
Yes.
And I really didn't fit in there. I hated being indoors, to be honest. And I picked up at the engineering easy enough, and I quite enjoyed it, but I didn't like it. So I was very friendly at the time with Neil Skillicorn through the motorbikes. And he said his uncle was possibly looking for apprentices. And I thought, yes, I'd like to be a joiner.
Yeah.
And I left Doughty's at the time where I was getting probably nearly £10 a week. And I went to Skillicorn and I was getting £1.19 and sixpence. And I'd have worked for nothing because I was so happy there. And the boss came to me one day and he said he would round it up to £2 because I could drive. I had a driving licence. So that was my
So you must have been, what, about 17 by then? 17,
well, I was 18
yeah.
by then. And I wish I'd gone there to start with, but it stood me in good stead because
I'm sure. I
learned how to grind drills and sharpen blades and stuff at Doughty's, which still was a great asset really. And when I got to Skillicorns, they had me filing saw blades and sharpening drills for the first week because all this stuff was suffering a bit from bluntness.
Yeah, and, like they do. They've been handy for those newel posts.
that too. But I really loved my time at Skillicorns, and I probably would have stayed there because Bob Skillicorn said to me that he was starting a site somewhere, and he wondered if I'd like to be foreman on the site. And at the time, my mum was killed in a car crash on Crosby School Hill.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry.
And I was 23 by then, but I'd just come out of my time. And my dad said, well, I'd really love you to come back to Crosby and work with me.
Yeah.
And I did, and with a heavy heart, I left Skillicorns, and it was a wonderful time for me, Sharon. It was really a very happy time and lots of fun and laughter and nailing people's trousers to the floor, and it was hijinks. It was really good.
Okay.
And it was a big firm at the time. And what we would do, we'd be crawling along on our knees, nailing floorboards, and they were all individual boards at the time. There was no chipboard, and you'd have a handful of 2.5-inch lost head nails in your hammer, and you'd have a race across the floor, nailing the floor down. Well, the trick was if the fella in front of you was getting ahead, you'd nail his trousers as you went along, and nail his trousers to the floor. And little tricks like that. It was
nice.
So much fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So then, you go on. What you going to say?
No, I was just going to say. So you've returned to the family business at 24, and just...
Yeah, well, I was still 23 actually, and I worked with my dad, who I say I idolised, and I got into the funeral business at the time with him. We were undertakers, and
I suppose it made sense, I suppose, being joinery skills to...
Oh, it was a very old tradition in the family.
Yeah.
And I think we were possibly one of the last firms making coffins from elm. And we would have these elm sets, as they called them. and make the coffins and wax them, and there was a real art in it.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was being phased out a bit because they'd started to import these chipboard coffins that are the norm now.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was part of it. But sadly, a year to the day after my mum's car crash, my dad took a huge stroke and he died that night.
Oh, my goodness.
It was a very sad time.
I bet.
And, I just had 1 year with him, really. And
he'd have been a young man then himself.
Well, he was only 57.
Yeah, that's
or
no age.
Just maybe 58. And
that's my age.
Yeah, well, my mum had been, I think she was 56, 57 when she was killed in the car. He never got over it.
No.
And just worked and worked and worked. He worked far too hard. In fact, the day he died, there was a stack of windows. I think he'd made 6 windows that day. And he worked far harder than I did. He was just obsessed. That was his way of coping with the situation.
How sad.
It was very sad. And I remember thinking at the time, which sounds a bit callous now, but I was 23 and I thought, he's 57. Well, that's quite old. And but it's not, Sharon, as we both know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 76 now, and I often wondered, I wondered what he would think of what I've built over the years, and I would love to him to see.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be very proud.
Seen what I've done with my life. But
yes.
It's a sad day, but you've got to get up and get going and move on.
So how did that shape what you did next?
Well, it did shape it in a way because I think the world of my brother, but working together doesn't work. It wasn't for us. We were, Red Rag and Bull springs to mind, and he had his ideas and I had mine. And anyway, I split up with him, and this is back in 1979. And it's a long time ago, isn't it? It's about 45 years ago.
Yeah, millennium year.
So it was, and Halewood on the TT.
I knew you'd know that.
And the Ducati, but funnily enough, I'm bringing the TT into it now because at that time, I was very friendly with Ken Harding, God bless him. He's dead a long time now, but Ken gave me a great opportunity. He said to me one day, our TT course contractor is retiring. And he said, we think that the Kissacks would be just the people to do the TT course. And I said, well, yes, we'll have a go at it. And Howard agreed with me. And I think this is back a little bit, I think it was actually when I started back with Dad. In fact, I think Dad was still alive at the time. And it'd be 1973. And we took on the TT course. And in those days, it was quite draconian. They were still stuffing jute sacks with straw to put up against the telegraph poles. Well, they would have been as much use, I suppose, as a piece of chocolate,
I think chocolate would have been more substantial,
because there was fellas hitting their heads on telegraph poles and that sort of thing. And well, it was Howard, actually. He said, why don't we use a whole bale in a bag? And they said, well, the bags aren't big enough. He said, well, this is a Manx thing, obviously. And for all the years, they'd been getting these bags made with Dunlop on them. And we said, well, maybe Dunlop would make some bigger bags, you see. So, I don't know about that. And it was, it
sounds incredible.
It was Manx. It was Manx. So eventually we got a new batch of bags, and Howard bought a stitcher. So we were dropping a bale in a bag and stitching it up. And it was a huge success.
Well, even that's a bit hard to hit, though, isn't it? But it would have been an improvement, but...
It was a big job, but at the time we had a sack loader that, it was, what was that? I can't remember the name of it now. It was a loader that fitted on the back of the wagon. And up until then, they'd handled all the bags onto the wagons. And, well, we were so mechanised with these telly loader, it was called. And it worked off the hydraulic pump. And when you dropped a bale on it, it chucked the bale on the wagon so the fella on the wagon could stack them. And that became the
It's
norm.
quite a skill, not get flattened by it.
Well, all the other things, Howard was very mechanical, and he welded up big frames to fit on our wagons, and all the fillers, all the petrol fillers were stacked on them so that they didn't have to be handled all the time.
Is that the things that you hang up at the grandstand?
Yeah, the shell.
So you did that too?
Yeah.
Flipping heck.
Modernised the whole thing.
Yeah.
And all those brackets that you see down along the grandstand, they were made by Howard Kissack.
Good grief.
It revolutionised it all, really.
And it's a gravity feed, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the benefit of the listeners who've never seen Pit Lane in TT
right.
Week. Yeah.
And these were eventually upgraded into dump fillers, which was a much more modern version. But those old fillers were quite collectible at the time. And I don't know if he's still got some of them, but we kept some of the Dunlop bags, and I think I've still got one somewhere. It was a revolution for the TT. And we were actually course contractors. Well, even after I'd left Howard, he carried on with it for years. And I think he did 35 years as the course contractor. And then he got sick of the red tape and if I can say it, the bullshit that was being offered by the ACU and the tourist board. And he told them to take the TT and shove it up where the sun doesn't shine.
Right.
And they were messing him about, and they were trying to get him to give... in fact, I'm telling you more about him than me now. But, they wanted a separate price for the Grand Prix and the TT, just to summarise it, and it was just nonsense because you couldn't split the two.
Well, it's the same amount of work, doesn't matter.
Well, it was stupid. And anyway, he stopped doing it, and I admire him for that because he just said enough. Yeah. So that was the story with the TT, and then...
So you left?
I'd left. And
you didn't go back to Scullicorns?
No, I didn't, but I bought their old workshop up in Queen's Road. Mm-hmm. And it was derelict, actually, and a big hole in the roof. But a good old friend of mine, and Graham Seed, his name is, he'd worked with me at Crosby, and hell of a man. He decided he wanted to come with me. And we had nothing, really. We had the worst wagon and an old planer and a circular saw, and carted all this stuff to Onken, and bought the workshop off Bob and Neil Skillicorn. And well, we went in there to start with. There's a huge hole in the roof where there'd been a big glass skylight, and anyway, we ducked in under the bits that did have a roof, and
didn't fix it then.
Well, we eventually fixed it, and we had an electric hoist to hoist things upstairs, and there wasn't much room for the digger. That was the trouble. And
well, they're waterproof, aren't they?
We rebuilt a complete digger in this workshop. How the hell we got it in there, I don't know. But we had lots of escapades, and two great friends, Keith and Trevor Moore, were involved in these escapades, and we rebuilt wagon engines and diggers and goodness knows what.
Amazing.
To get the business on its feet. Because
and what was this business called?
It was called Derry Kissack Limited. Because I've always been called Derry. My name's Derek, really, but it only got used on occasions when people were cross with me. They say, Derek. Well, so I've always been Derry Kissack, really.
Yeah.
And, so then I'll jump ahead a bit now, because I decided I'd got badly hurt up on the mountain, and somebody said to me one day, I think it's the postman, he said,
how did you get badly hurt on the mountain?
Well, shall I put the book to one side for a minute, and I'll tell you how I got badly hurt. We started this thing called the Purple Helmets. Well, shall I go back to that? I'll start.
You go back to the Purple. You've always just mentioned Keith and Trevor, who I know are former members.
Keith was one of the originals, one of the 8 originals in the helmets. But just to go back a little bit further than that, at the time, I was heavily involved in the Southern Motorcycle Club. And we decided, it didn't have any money, and it was the poorest club in the island. And I remember saying to them one night, how much have we got? And they said, well, we've got £10,000, but we can't touch it because we need the interest. And I said, well, this young fella, Steve Colley, I said he could do with a hand here. Brian, his dad, was a great friend of mine, and he was going away to Junior Kickstart at the time, and they were struggling a bit for money. And I said, well, why don't we give Steve Colley some money and try and help him? has always been the ethic of the Southern Club to help people.
Yeah.
In fact, we used to give money where the other clubs didn't. And I said, would it make any difference if the club only had 9,000? And I said, I propose we give Steve Colley £1,000. Well, this had never been heard of, because all they would get at the best was enough for the boat fare to Liverpool to put them on an even footing with an English chap. Anyway, I said, why don't we do this? It was unanimously agreed. Everybody was up for it. Give young Steve a hand. And he never forgot it. He's always been very loyal and a great friend to me as well. And a few years later, we were still struggling because, I tried selling a few hot dogs for the club, and we had a trial down at Scarlet in the evenings, and that was on a right away, so there was only a coin in the hat, if you like, and I think it was still on the old half-crown to get in to watch this trial. And I said, well, this is really not enough money for what we want to do to help people to go to the Enduros and things. I said, I propose that we have a show in TT Week. We really need to run a show. I said, and I've spoken to Steve Colley, and he's up for putting a proper demonstration show on.
Yes.
But he said to me, my wrists get tired, he said, and I could do with a backup act.
A support act.
A support act. Well, this is where the Purple Helmets were formed, because I didn't get the coats or anything, and I can't claim any credit for any of that, because they were called the Sheepskull Enduro Riders. And through a guy, one of the lads, enduro rider called Andrew Jiggle, he found these coats, and he was a Sheffield fireman who knew Keith Moore, and they were sort of knocked about together, and they decided that they might do a show, but what would they call themselves? Just as a backup act, and there was 8 of them, and they decided that they would do the backup act, and what would they call themselves? And somebody said, well, it'd be a bit like the White Helmets.
Yeah, which I remember seeing as a young girl.
Everybody's heroes.
The
White Helmets, you see. So they said, somebody else said, well, be more like the Purple Helmets. A right bunch of tossers, these fellas. So anyway, that's how it came about. And somebody else said, well, we'll call ourselves the World Famous because nobody's ever heard of us. And this is where the tongue-in-cheek bit comes in, where nobody had heard of it. And ironically, all these years later, we are world famous and have travelled the world through South America and Brazil. And
on that bus?
No, the bus only went to Poland. That was as far as the bus went. But
it's far enough. One of
those
things.
Wonderful days where we had a double-decker bus to Poland, and I wasn't actually in it at the time, but I will claim the credit for getting them into show business, because that's how it happened. They organised themselves. I had no input into that. But I would say...
all excellent. They were all excellent riders in their day, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. This is what made it what it was.
Phenomenal riders.
In champions, so many champions, enduro riders, trials riders, because to make a thing look... It's a bit like Les Dawson playing the piano badly.
Yes, what a great analogy.
You've got to be very good at what you do. And we've always prided ourselves on that. And that's why shite's good and shit's bad. Shite is clever. And shit isn't. In life, shit is bad. So I often quoted that in the commentary.
Yeah, I'll ask you for a quote later, but maybe we'll think of another one, hey?
We've had such wonderful times, and what an eye-opener, in fact, I've had a second lifetime through the Purple Helmets and what we've done.
How did you get to be the role of the frontman, the PR?
well, through,
MC.
I suppose through promoting it to start with, I was involved, and Brenda and Les Jones it was at the time, and sadly Les died.
Yeah. And
Brenda's still the secretary of the Southern Motorcycle
Is she really?
Club.
My goodness.
After 45 years,
done,
I
Brenda.
think. Wonderful time she's done with it, and a lot of the credit went to her but with the two of us, and of some of the other committee as well. They were always good, to promote things, and we decided we'd have this show anyway. Couldn't find a proper venue at the time. And there was a piece of ground up behind the testing station at Tremode. And rather than being an amphitheatre, it was completely the other way. The field sloped away downhill from it, and it was totally unsuitable, but it was tarmac, and that's what Steve Colley needed. So we rounded up an old car, and I put my wagon up there, and he was going to jump up on the wagon, and all the tricks that he did, and he was fantastic. And, well, for the first time ever, the purple helmets appeared, and you could it was unbelievable that these people, 8 guys, wobbled into view on matte black painted C90 Hondas with these old brand new tropal coats they were. And they were coats that had been sourced from Army and Navy stores, probably for £5 or £6 a piece. And they were the tackle. The impact of seeing these people that night stuck in people's minds, and nobody could really see except those that were lucky enough to be right up at the front, because down at the back, all they could see was the front tyre of the bike as it went past. But they put through their skills, through their action, with daring stunts. And I was thinking, what would we say about this? And Roy Moore, God bless him, TT commentator, top man, a good friend of mine since school days, actually. And Roy really didn't know what to make of it, because he was there because he was an expert on Steve Colley. And he was totally genned up on Steve, or what he'd won and how many championships in the Scottish 6 days and everything like that. When the purple helmets appeared, he was gobsmacked. He really didn't know what to say. I think he'll back me up on this. Yes. And he said, "Oh, whoops, somebody's fallen off there." And I was whispering in his ear, and I said, "I think they're supposed to, Roy." "Oh, right." So he picked up the gist of it, and it all took place, but I think we gathered about £25 in a bucket for the St. John's ambulance. And at that time I thought, this has got a lot of mileage in it. This is going to be good. So I think the next move really was Steve Collins was on the committee with me in the Southern Club. And
he's one of the riders in the
Yeah, he was one of the originals.
Yes.
And Jimmy Davidson was on the committee, and he designed a poster for the following one. And Jimmy was great with the graphics and the posters and the humorous lines and stuff. And
James Bond on skis, was he?
Oh, the ski man. But he wasn't in the original 8. But Steve Collins was, and we decided we'd go and see Onchan Commissioners and see if we could hire Onchan Stadium. Well, this was totally outrageous at the time. And I had actually had dealings, believe this or not, I'd had dealings some years before with Douglas Corporation. And Mervyn Wynne was the parks director, and he said to me that it was £12 10 shillings or £12.50 to hire the bowl. And I said, "Well, how does that come about, Mervyn?" And he said, "Oh, well," he said, "we have to pay the man overtime to lock the gate afterwards." And I said, "Is that all it costs for the bowl?" "Oh, yes," he said, "unless you want to make a donation." And I said, "Well, we didn't really want the bowl, King George Park, because it was grass. We wanted the tarmac, you see." So armed with this information that it was only £12.50 for the bowl, Steve and myself went to Onchan Commissioners and sat down with them at the meeting. And they said, "Well, what would you be prepared to pay for the bowl for the night?" And I said, "Well, I have to tell you that Douglas Corporation charge as much as £12.50 for the bowl." And they all kind of looked at me as if to say, £12.50? It's hardly worth opening the gate for that, you see. So anyway, I think we agreed to give them a few £100 anyway to see how it went for the first time. And I've never really told this story before, actually, but we got Onchan Stadium. We came out of there laughing all over our faces that we'd got Onchan Stadium. So then, of course, we had to conjure up a show. And this is where the purple helmets all buckled down and made some wonderful contraptions, and some of the gear that we had for years with a rollover bike and a long bike. And
we'll put some links to some of the videos of purple helmets in the show notes for for anybody who's lived under a rock and never seen the performance. They're wonderful.
Oh, it was
absolutely wonderful.
It was a real eye-opener anyway, and we actually filled Duncan Stadium, and with Jimmy's posters, and we had St John Ambulance there, and the police, obviously, and it was a big thing to organise, and Brenda did a lot of that, and myself, I went on the radio and promoted it all, and I used to, put on a young fella's voice, but why are they called the purple helmets when the helmets are painted black? And then I'd say, don't know, son, you'll have to ask your mother. Well, that became quite a famous quote, you see. Nobody really wanted to tell the kids why they were called the purple helmets. Well, the legend started to grow, and from one night's appearance at the testing station, this grew into a real legend, and we used to bring a guest rider. If Steve Colley wasn't available, we had the Kangaroo Kid, and we had guys from the Iron Curtain countries and on all MZs and things, and eventually I started to think, we really need the white helmets here, because I idolised them, to be honest. They were such a great, disciplined outfit, They were the British. They were the British Army, for Christ's sake.
I know, yeah. They knew how to put a parade on.
And somebody said to me, "Oh, you won't get them. They're booked up most of the time."
Are they still in existence?
No, not now, Sharon. But somebody said they were booked up most of the time, and royal tattoos and that sort of thing. So I thought, being cheeky me as I always was, I thought, I know it. I'll ring up and ask them. So I looked up this Blandford camp in Dorset and got the phone number, and I rang up. Cheeky, I said, you probably won't have heard of us. I said, I'm Derry Kissack, I'm in the Isle of Man, and I represent the world-famous Purple Helmets. And straight away, the lady on the switchboard, I can remember her name was Zoe. Wow, she said, our guys idolise you. And that was my first words with
that's brilliant.
Purple helmet.
How
with
brilliant.
The white helmet.
Yeah.
So then she put me onto the captain. And they were over the moon. They wanted to come to the TT. They wanted to come to us.
I bet they did. They're all motorcycle enthusiasts.
And from then on, I brought them 5 times in all. And we became great friends with the regular guys, who was the instructor, the wagon driver, and a couple of others. They kept them on the team to instruct the new guys. Yes. But each year there was a new captain, there was a new team of young lads who they'd been out in Afghanistan and places, but they got to meet us. And
did you show them any tricks?
Showed them lots of tricks, Sharon. And they all wanted to join the Purple Helmets.
I bet they did.
Because we would be having a pint of beer before the show, and they weren't allowed, and it was such huge discipline, and we had wonderful times. And if I'm rabbiting on too much,
I'm really curious to know, where did the most famous quote come from?
Would that be at speeds approaching 100 miles an hour?
Yes, it might be.
Well, that was one of the famous quotes, and I think it was Jimmy Davidson that coined that phrase. You see, Jimmy used to study the Viz magazine, which is quite a lewd publication in the northeast. In the northeast, I know a lot of his captions on the bins and things, which wheelie bin racing and one thing and another. But these captions, these things, I came up with a few of them, I suppose. But Jimmy was always good for a quote. And
I remember the names on the sides of the wheelie bins.
Well,
I don't think any of them are repeatable here, but they were they're too funny to tell.
They were great, and 2 of the favourites, really, I suppose, the great Jeff Cannell, TT commentator. He
number 4.
Yeah, he was number 4, because I used to mongrelise it a bit, and I'd say, well, this bin is number 4 is named after Jeff Cannell, the great TT commentator. I said, and it's number 4 Cannell, you see. So anyway, if you say it quick enough, it's quite rude. But tell the women to cover the kids' ears and that sort of thing. And then that was one of the favourites.
So it's chariot racing, really. The wheelie bins were on their side and being dragged along for the visual kind of explanation.
They were very fast. They had a skid plate put under them.
Oh, terrifying.
They were proper wheelie bins, but we put proper axles on them with ball bearing wheels and things, and they reached quite high speeds around the stadium, and many of them were wrecked, but the names on the side left a lot to be desired, as you say. And I think the last one ever, just before we retired, was quite naughty really, but it had Dewan King. It was called Dewan King.
Oh, okay.
And I said, I have to explain to the crowd that Dewan is a Manx for John. I said so.
Not
but
Juan.
It can be pronounced Juan, you see. So I'd explained it all to them that it was Juan. I said, so the bin is called Dewan King, or it could be, the first name could be Juan. So then it started to catch on that that's what it's actually said. It was Juan King, the bin rider, you see. So this is how it went. We all laughed quite a lot about that, Sharon. But there was too many funny things.
Schoolboy humour.
So many things to tell you about. And we weren't supposed to smile when we were riding and that sort of thing. And it was very, very funny. And
What about Piano Man?
Piano Man, a legend to this day.
Absolutely.
Stephen Finnegan. You know, I have actually named them all now in this book. It was a book to explain the story of the helmets, because I was only really the only one that people recognised because I was on the microphone. And then
without the dark glasses and the helmet.
Without that. And a lot of people were very surprised when the book came out that they knew far more of them than they realised, because the lads would have the coat and the helmets, and it was a fantastic thing, really.
Yeah, it's a great book. I'm looking at it here. It's at speeds approaching 100 miles an hour. And I believe you can get it on Amazon.
No, you can't. In fact, it's just about sold out.
Well, they must have to do a reprint.
We've had 2 reprints and given 30% of the money to charity. Mm-hmm. In fact, all the profits have gone to the hospice and the Queen's Pier.
Fab.
For our chosen charities. But I think there's 1 or 2 left in local bookshops and at the Motor Museum at Derby, who now house Purple Helmet's display, actually.
Mm-hmm. Along with the Victory Cafe, there's one of the bikes there.
The Victory Cafe, they have a few books, I think. But we've made so many friends over the years. It's people who used to come up and hug us after events, and they all wanted a photo and an autograph, and it was almost like being famous, like somebody said at the start.
Famous.
The world famous. And it's been a wonderful time, and 27 years of this madness and mayhem, and all over England and Ireland. We did the Irish motorcycle show. We went to Northern Ireland.
And what about the South America trip you mentioned? Did you go on that one?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. This is in my time of injury.
Yeah.
When the German hit me on the mountain road and smashed my leg. In fact, I was in the middle of that story, wasn't I? Because Greenlight Television were filming us that day. It was Mad Sunday in 2002. It was 22 years ago, Sharon.
Good grief.
And they were filming the Purple Helmets. Well, we got as far as the bungalow, and there'd been a crash and the road was shut temporarily, so we sat and we waited. And the helicopter was up above filming, just waiting for us to start again. And one of our oldest tricks, is one we always open with, is the nose to tail, where you ride as close to the rider in front as you can possibly get, with your front tyre almost touching his number plate, his rear number plate, and with your left arm up your back and your tongue out, like a speed demon. Well, the road was eventually cleared, and we were allowed to start, and Jimmy contacted the pilot of the helicopter, said, 3, 2, 1, let's go. So we set off up the mountain mile, up the Hillwood Rise, not the mountain mile. We'd only gone a few hundred yards past the footbridge, and the boy in front of me, Michael Alty, God bless him, his bike, the gearbox was faulty, and it dropped down 2 gears with no brake light, nothing like that, and caused an obstacle in front of me, and I just had time to swerve to the right. It was all I could have done at the time, and I curse it since, because if I'd have swerved to the left, nothing would have happened. But I swerved to the right, and glanced off Michael's coat with my shot and started a tank slapper in the middle of the road, and out of the corner of my eye, Fritz, as I call him, the German, was just about to overtake us all on a VFR Honda, and he hit my right leg right in the middle of the femur.
Oh, God.
And his bike cartwheeled down the road and was totally written off. He landed in the peat at the side of the road and dislocated his little finger. So that was good as far as he was concerned. In the meantime, I think I went up over his head, landed in the road, and skidded off to the side of the road with a broken femur, all the ribs on the left side, and the left collarbone, and my right thumb. And I think that was because the throttle had bust out. But the great story was that my old friend Neil Kinraid, he was the chief inspector of police at the time, he had his full silver braided hat, the uniform on him, and he came and he dropped down on his knees in the mud, and he cradled my head in his arms, and I was sort of conscious, but my right leg was at a right angle, and his first words to me were, "By Christ, you were lucky, Derry." And if you don't mind me swearing here, I said to him, "How the f*** do you make that up, Neil?" Of course, he thought that I was lucky to be alive, and I thought I wasn't very lucky with this broken leg. So we laughed about it for years afterwards, and he was great, and he eventually got me in an ambulance, and well, that was the last time we went round the course on Mad Sunday. But Greenlight, I believe, have got the film of the whole crash, and they've often said to me, "Would I like to see it?" And Sharon, I really don't want to see it. I've never seen it to this day, and that was quite some afternoon, I can tell you.
Yeah, I recall it happening. Everyone was very worried.
If I'm rambling too much, stop me, but this brought into another thing. The lovely Dot Tilbury used to come and help us out when I was out of action, and this, obviously, it was Sunday, Mad Sunday, and the show at Donkin Stadium was that night. The lads had nobody to do the microphone because I was in hospital, and Dot said she would stand in for me. Well, she did a great job.
Yes,
and
she did.
It was even funnier because she got one of our guys to put a fake plaster cast on his leg and stick his foot out of the back of the ambulance. And Dot was on the microphone, and she said, "Now, before we start, ladies and gentlemen, we want a big round of applause here for Derry Kissack tonight. He's in the ambulance, but he's going round." And I think it was Glenn that was in the ambulance, one of our guys, and he was waving out of the ambulance with the dark glasses on, so nobody knew it wasn't me.
Yeah, I remember that. It was very funny.
Did you see that?
Yes, I did see it.
Well, Dotty made this very, very funny, and he waved as he went round the stadium before the show started. Well, the next morning, some of the nurses must have been there the night before, and one of them was really upset, and I said, "Well, what's the problem, nurse?" And she said, "You're naughty." She said, "Why did you go to Onken Stadium last night?" And I said, "I didn't." I said, "I'm lying in bed here with a broken leg, for goodness sake." And she said, "Really?" And I said, "Yes." And she honestly thought, God bless her, that I'd been out of bed and gone to Onken Stadium. So I've always thanked Dot for that.
Oh, excellent. I mean, there were thousands and thousands of people. What was the sort of gate numbers you had at those events?
I don't know. We never counted them, but
thousands more. The promenade, the Douglas Promenade.
The stadium was packed for close on 25 years. I think we did at the stadium before we stopped going in there.
Was it 25 years?
And
God.
It was unbelievable, the number of people and our contribution. I think we made a difference, Sharon. I think we made a difference to tourism.
We absolutely did.
And to the TT to bring all these people. And it transpired that a lot of them weren't really interested in the TT. They came here for the atmosphere. And certainly to see our show and to see the purple helmets down on the prom, well, that was our goal was to get down the
purple helmets and the red arrows. That's all the reason you come to the TT.
Well, we didn't cost as much as the red arrows, I can tell you.
No.
And our goal was to go down the prom. And we brought the white helmets with us down the prom. Steve Colley, of course, was down there anyway. And wonderful nights of entertainment. And the promenade would be 10 deep, as you well know. And we always went on last. And the reason for that was to make people stay till the end. And it seemed to work. People did stay to see the purple helmets. And we had Russ Swift there parking cars. And Duke put a lot into it. They organised that rocket-powered bloody quad or whatever it was. And the entertainment through Duke and Bushies that instigated that down there. You know, the whole thing was magnificent. But they couldn't see the wood for the trees, I'm afraid. And the corporation more or less killed off Bushy by putting his rent up. And in my opinion, they should have given him that car park for nothing, for what he did for the TT. Martin Brunchweiler contributed so much through Bushies, and he's still contributing through Bushies. But he was a legend. He not only in the pub itself, but across the road in the tent.
Yes.
The corporation kept putting his rent up.
I see that they've done something with the Finoddery for this TT, haven't they? They're collaborating.
Yeah,
so that's
in the Villa Gardens.
Yeah, that's something to look forward to.
But it's a bit the Manx crab, you know. When a thing's doing well, they try to stop it or
we talked about that before we started. I mean, what would you do going forward? What sort of, now that purple helmets aren't there, can you think of anything else, that sort of thing that would...
For tourism in general, you know, they want to stop charging people rent on stuff like that and encourage them. Goodness knows how much they charge Bushy now for that Villa Marina. They should give him the place for the fortnight. It's costing them a lot of money to put the stuff on. And where would we be without him?
Well, yeah, who would do it?
What would be there?
Maybe there's a tender process. You'd think there would be. I don't know. But
it should be free.
Yeah.
And another little bit of... It's nothing to do with the TT, but there's a little cafe at the Doon Halt for the trams.
Oh, it's brilliant, isn't it?
It's a lovely little cafe.
But the tram doesn't stop.
Well, yes, but the likes of that, they should give that to an operator rent-free. Just let them pay the electric, let them pay the rates. Why do they want to take rent off them? You know, it's for the good of the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man owns the railways. We own the railways. Why don't we give them that rent-free? Where is the thinking coming from? They want to get the heads the right way round.
Yeah, there's a fair
negative.
bit of... Yeah,
there's a negative thought.
I know where we are. I mean, 40 years has gone by like that in my career. This is the 40th year I've been in financial services. I started in Barclays when I was 18. Yeah. So...
where does it go?
But the finance sector has been what supported a lot of things along with but the TT has been consistent, hasn't it, throughout that time?
But you know, don't shoot the goose that laid the golden egg. They want to take an example from the Southern Club when we gave Steve Colley £1,000. Give these places rent free, open the place up, make things happen. There's no vision at them somehow. I mean, I'm going to start a rant now, I suppose.
Well, I mean, the podcast is about, sharing good ideas to make the place more successful. I mean, that's the point of this, right?
Well, you know, I'm a joiner and builder. I've had my own business for 40 years, and I see the folly of the planning department. I see the planning. They're knocking down houses at... what they used to call the camp at Ballasalla, cavity brick built houses knocked down to put up new council houses. Those houses that they knocked down had new plastic windows, they'd been insulated. Why didn't they sell those to first-time buyers? They could almost give them to them and build the new council houses on some brownfield sites, because the site as it became after the demolition was no use, because the sewer connection would be no use, the footings were no use, they had to start all over again.
At a massive cost.
At a massive cost, plus the cost of the demolition. I mean, it's not rocket science, Sharon. These were perfectly good cavity brick built houses. Young couples, housing shortage. Why did they knock them down? Now, you know, I shouldn't get annoyed about things, but I think our generation have forgotten more about building than these people will ever know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. But no, it's a really good point, and maybe it can be utilised in future projects such as this. Let's hope.
So.
Let's hope.
When you look at them, they're going to build a village, they said, up in Domain Road. It's nothing like a village. It's townhouses could be any city anywhere in England. What happened there where terraces were knocked down, where they had lovely communities, and they put the people in high-rise flats and places like that, and destroyed all the communities? Yeah. What are they going to do in Domain Road? They're going to put up these 3 or 4 story townhouses, the slums of tomorrow.
Oh dear. Well, let's hope not.
Well, I can see it coming.
Yeah. So, well, if it's all right with you, we'll go on to talk about the books that you've written, Derry. So, you must be, if not the first, definitely the second author I've ever had on the podcast. So,
oh really?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, you've got Do You Know, Derry Kissack. No, but I know a fellow who does. That looks good. Is that one still in publication?
It's not in print at the moment, actually, but I think there's some in Bridge bookshops.
Right, okay.
But this all started when I'd been smashed up on the mountain, and I sat here with a broken leg, and I think it's the postman said to me one day, "Why don't you write a book? You're always making us laugh." And I thought, well, I'll try, but it's really not that easy to get it started.
No.
And I remember at school doing exams, you'd write your name and the date, and then freeze. You just freeze with the pen in your hand. Well, I thought, well, I'll try, and I got a fool's cap pad, and I started to write, and from memory as far back as I could remember, and it eventually became a book.
That's amazing. Well, it's one way, isn't it? And then there's this amazing one at speeds approaching 100 miles an hour. When was that brought out?
Oh, last year. Was it for TT last year?
Right,
I think
okay.
we did that.
Yeah.
And that's the history of the purple helmets. And there's a fantastic picture on the cover, actually.
Oh, there is. All of them.
And it was taken in Quarterbridge car park by Denise Walton, who's the Great Waldo's lady wife. And she's a great photographer.
She is.
And the book was assembled by Robbo, who's one of the Carnforth chapter of the Purple Helmets, because 6 or 7 of them lived in England, all connections through Enduros, and his lady friend Zoe Tapping, and it's a really nice hardback book. But I think the Derry Kissack one, I think, became the best-selling Manx book at the time by a Manx author. And then on the Jubilee of the Manx 2-day trial, it was the Sidecar Golden Jubilee. And I've always been very keen on the sidecar trials.
Yeah, so that's 2-day trial that used to be held in the spare weekend between Grand Prix practice, and it's not now, is it?
It's not. They spoiled it a bit, really. And it was really a big part of Manx Grand Prix week, where a lot of the riders, such as Nick Jeffries and people, I think it was 1976, he won a race in the Grand Prix and the 2-day trial on a solo the same weekend.
Did he really?
The same week. And Nick Jeffries, I think he's the only one that's ever done that.
He was a great rider. I liked the way he would always wheelie over the Bluff Bridge.
Great guy.
Real showman.
Yeah, well, this book came about because it was going to be the Golden Jubilee, and I volunteered to write a book about it because I think I was the longest riding sidecar rider ever known in the Isle of Man, from when I was 18 till I was 55. And
helped to have a bit of welding experience.
It was a hell of a career where I knew them right back from the days of the 4-stroke bikes when they were cobbled up in the back shed to the modern 2-stroke bikes that there are now.
Yeah. And
I could remember all the riders' names that I'd ridden with all the years. So I was best placed to write this book, and it was only done in a very limited number, but I think it was well received.
Oh, fantastic. I'll take some shots of those before I go, so I'll be able to put something in the show notes about that. And what about books that you've read? Are you a big reader?
Funny enough, when I was in hospital at one previous occasion, I read a lot of Catherine Cookson books, and I don't suppose they're kind of a male sort of thing, but they're great stories, and they were always up around the northeast in times of poverty and stuff like that, and they were really good reading at the time.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I read quite a few of them, and of course they're on television now, aren't they? But
yeah.
I've read various other books, but mainly autobiographies of people. My old friend Mick Grant, he did one, and he's a close friend of mine, Mick, and comes to us every TT.
Yeah, so I was always a great rider.
Yeah,
Mick,
fantastic.
My cousin's from Reading, and she always call him Mick Grant. I said, it's Mick Grant.
Of course it is.
It's Mick Grant.
There's only one R in Grant.
It's another one, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
So what's the main thing that you've done throughout your life that's given you the most fulfillment, would you say? I mean,
I think I've made friends with a lot of people.
yeah.
That means a lot to me. And I would say I'm very rich in friends.
You sure are.
I just love people and how to, when you meet somebody, make time for them and have a natter. Because this is not a rehearsal. You only pass this way once.
Absolutely.
But people are in a hurry, Sharon. They're all race past you on the road. And this is one downside of new residents. Because the Isle of Man was a much slower place years ago. And a better place, I think. But we certainly didn't have as much money as we've got now. We certainly didn't. And these people, they hand the kids 10 quid for pocket money. Well, we didn't really get pocket money. Used to do a bit of work on a Saturday, and I would be straightening nails or chopping sticks. And
as long as you weren't nicking stuff like...
No, never that. And I had a fantastic childhood, really, growing up in a builder's yard and making bogies and trolleys and pram wheels and things, and then building motorbikes. And our first motorbike was a thing called a Psy motor, and it fitted on the front wheel of a push bike.
Yeah, I'd like to see the health and safety manual on that.
well, it was great fun, but it didn't have much power, and used to take it down to Crosby tennis courts in a wheelbarrow. Because we were only about 8 or 9 years old, and then we got BSA Bantams, and it was a wonderful childhood, really.
Yeah.
But my father taught me so many skills, and I was interested, and I always did well in things I was interested in. And it's like subjects at school, they should drop some of them. There was just ridiculous subjects that you would never use in a lifetime, and we never have used them. And this is where they should seed the kids out who are going to be lawyers and doctors and the like. I mean, what was the good of teaching me Latin? Well, I ask you, I know a bit of French.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Have you got a favourite quote?
I've got lots of quotes.
A polite one.
Oh, no. I'd have to stop and think about that, Sharon. Yeah. A great friend with Nigel Kermode, and the great guy himself. He's had Green's Cafe for years.
Yes.
This here on the front of the Derry Kissack book, it says, do you know Derry Kissack? He said, no, but I know a fella who does. And that was a quote from Nigel years ago, and he's always been a great guy for quotes. And I know it's a little bit rude.
Like your quote on the up here. Well, that's...
let's drink too much and talk shite.
Yes. Well,
I've got that.
That's pretty good too.
There's lots of quotes and things, there's fellas dying today that's never died before, they're just... I know, I just love friends and people. And Oakles, of course. I love Oakles ale. And good bitter, and Bushy's bitter. There's a few good ones out there. And Theakston's. I've got lots of friends up in North Yorkshire who used to come to us for the TT. And some of them still do, in fact. And,
yes. Well, look, it's been absolutely a pleasure to talk to you today, and all sorts of things I didn't know about. Some great yarns there. I mean,
used to say to the boys when we were going to do a show somewhere, I didn't need to tell them, say, right, thumbs up, drink as much as you can, because it's not a rehearsal. Yeah,
indeed.
Within reason, of course.
Within reason, within healthy limits.
I had to put that in there.
Yes. Thank you so much, Derry. Where can we go to learn all about you? You're on Facebook, aren't you?
I've got a little bit on Facebook. I think if you Google me, there's a little bit on there.
There's plenty. There's plenty. Yes, there is. Thank you so much for your time today.
A wonderful life, Sharon. And, even with all the setbacks and the illnesses and the operations, I don't think I'd change it, really. You know, I don't think I've got a wonderful wife, Tricia, that looks after me so well, and I love her to bits.
Yeah, that's
And
lovely.
I'll finish on that note.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.